Thank you for finding us again on No Stop Lights. I'm sorry to my Baptist friends, but yeah, this is bourbon. It's Jefferson's Reserve bourbon. If you take more than a swallow or two, it'll make you want to recite the Declaration of Independence. Some folks have called this, my wife in particular, has lectured to me about clutter. You got too much clutter around you. This isn't clutter. This is strategic product placement. All these folks have been kind enough to support our feeble attempt at podcasting. We've turned a feeble attempt at radio show into a pretty successful endeavor, and give us time, we're going to be successful at this. I want to thank all of you who have viewed the most recent videos. We're over, I think, 30,000 views now in our videos. That's pretty impressive as far as I'm concerned. Subscribers are on the increase. We're learning how to do this, but none of it would have been possible without our sponsors. And what we've done, guys, is we've gravitated away from politics in general. We're talking about local businesses. We'll get back to politics. I'm sure that there'll be a series of podcasts we dedicate to national government, state government, local government. But right now, we seem to have found kind of a lane that a lot of our viewers and listeners really enjoy, and that is some of the local businesses that are so essential to our community, telling their story and kind of where they came from. One of the compliments we had a couple of weeks back, Mayor Stephen Wakila was with us a couple of weeks ago, and Stephen said he bumped into a person I'll leave unnamed, and he said, hey, man, have you been watching these podcasts Ken does? Yeah, some, not all, but some. You think you know somebody until you hear their story out of their own mouth. I mean, you hear hearsay and innuendo is one thing, but we've decided to try and track down some of these business owners to get them to agree, and men and women, to come on the podcast and in their own words tell their story. And I think Florentines and people in the PD region have really enjoyed that. Victor's, FMU, McLeod Health, Carolina Bank. I got a guest here. I don't want to steal the thunder here. MPD Electric Co-op have been unbelievably gracious in supporting our podcast. McCall Farms, Pepsi, Florence, PLC Commercial Real Estate. I left one unnamed because that's the story of the bourbon. I've not known this guy but 6 or 8 years, but I knew of the business much longer than that. And in the world of politics and booze, there's kind of a convergence. It's a controlled substance, so politics gets very intimately involved in that. Micky Finn's agreed to be one of our sponsors, along with, once again, Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, McCall Farms, Pepsi of Florence, PLC Commercial Real Estate, and McLeod Health. In the radio show, I started talking about Jefferson's Ocean. And Rick Havekost, a friend of mine and the proprietor of Micky Finn, said, hey, man, you got me selling more Jefferson's Ocean than I ever imagined I'd sell. And that kind of began, I don't want to say a business relationship, but it has become somewhat of a business relationship. And I've asked Rick to join us to tell his story, as some of these other businesses have. So first of all, in a formal sense, welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
And I want to get to the story, but the Jefferson's Reserve and the Jefferson's Ocean, he kind of handpicks these, very old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, very small batch. And once again, I'm an old school Jeffersonian, so I have an affinity for this name of booze. But Rick, I want to start with this. And I grew up just down the road in Pamplico. You didn't. The name Havekost is not a name traditional to this area. No. Where did Rick Havekost come from, and how did the family end up in Florence?
Yeah, I can tell you. In 1977, my father was an executive with Nucor Steel, and the plant here was in Darlington, the Nucor plant was in Darlington, the Vulcraft plant was in Florence, and he got promoted to vice president in 1969 or 69-70, and headquarters had just moved to Charlotte. And so if you think you're going to climb the ladder, you better be close to the corporate headquarters, and Ken Iverson was the CEO there at the time. Anyway, so they moved Dave Aycock and my dad down here, and Dave was the plant manager and vice president of Nucor. My dad was plant manager, vice president of Vulcraft. So we ended up here in 77, 78. I was 9 years old. And no, the name is, first of all, it's a unique name, definitely not a name you'd hear in the South. But anyway, that's how we ended up here, is through my dad's promotion to being a vice president of Nucor.
So where was home, Rick?
I was born in Norfolk, Nebraska. My dad was from Hooper, Nebraska, population of about 600 people, small town. We were farmers. One thing I'll give credit to is my grandfather, my dad's dad. Most of the time you recruit your kids and have a lot of kids that stay on the farm, and he wanted to change the family dynamic. So there was 2 boys, and he made sure they were straight A students and went off to college and played baseball. And one became an executive of Caterpillar, and my father, vice president of Nucor. They both retired around 50 years of age. Sold the farm and never looked back.
What do you remember about Nebraska?
Well, I thought it was a lot better than it was. And I say that because I
think football. You know that. I mean, I think Cornhusker football.
Well, here's why. We held the farm all the time until I think Dad sold it in, late 90s. So we would go out there, but I was a swimmer. And I got recruited, full scholarships to about 50 schools in America. Stanford, SMU, you name it. I had it. And out of respect to my father, because he played baseball at Nebraska, I took a recruiting trip to Nebraska. And he was a letterman there, and just part of I'd been there, and it was good memories because I was a kid. And so I didn't commit to Southern Cal or Stanford or Florida or Georgia or the school I ended up at, South Carolina, that I loved. I ended up committing out of respect for my father, and I had an incredible recruiting trip. I mean, it was unbelievable. Facilities back then, Nebraska had better facilities than anybody in all sports. Well, I took that recruiting trip May, maybe June. It was one of my last ones, and it was 80 degrees, and I don't really remember that way. So I get to Nebraska, and it's great, and we climbed the top 10 immediately. I finished second in the big back then it was the Big 8 my freshman year, starting to set records. And lo and behold, December comes, so does January. And I remember I have a VHS tape to this day where the high that one of those days I recorded and bring it home and showed people was -8, and the low was -38 with a wind chill of -50. And so Nebraska is not as inviting as you think it is in the dead of winter. You got to love it. You got to be there. You got to want it in your blood. So I stuck it out there 2 years. That's the only downside in Nebraska is the weather. But the university, like if you know Nebraska football, you can say what you want about Clemson or Alabama. There was a 15, 20-year stretch under Tom Osborne where they either played for the national title or won it. And that was a lot of pride when I went to school there. And it's an incredible school. It's now in the Big Ten, but it is a really good academic school.
The Nebraska-Oklahoma rivalry would have been the best there was in my youth. I mean, when I reflect on my formative years, it was Nebraska and Oklahoma playing football. That was the biggest deal you could imagine.
One of the best perks of being first of all, going to school for free and eating all the food you want and traveling around the world. That was great and all. But as an athlete at Nebraska, you got free tickets to go to every sporting event if you want to, including football. If you can imagine, nowadays they don't do that. You get in a lottery. I don't care who. Jadeveon Clowney probably couldn't get a ticket at some of these games now. But anyway, so I'd get out of the morning workouts on Saturday. We'd practice from 5 in the morning until 8 in the morning. We'd get out and clean up. Now, their games would start at 11, at 12 o'clock East Coast time. So, you didn't have a whole lot of time. You'd go get some food. And Nebraska didn't have lights either. I remember when they were putting in, they used to do temporary lights. So the games were always at 12 o'clock kickoff. And that was back when they were on TV every day. There was about 10 schools, Michigan, you know the schools, right? Nebraska was one of them.
The Blue Bloods.
You got it. Texas, you know them all. Anyway, so one of the best parts was I went to that game. I was there when Nebraska was ranked number 1. And God, what was the starting quarterback at Oklahoma got hurt, and they put in this little kid. I'm trying to think of his name. And they ended up upsetting Nebraska that year. I think they went on to win the national title too. I was at the game, and it was always the game. I always thought it was funny. We had the game of the century every year. But I started back in I think '72 when Johnny Rodgers won the Heisman Trophy. They ran it all the way back.
Some people say that's the greatest college football game ever played.
Yeah, they still show the highlights. So when you're at Nebraska, it was just a huge deal.
Okay, you leave Nebraska, but does the family stay in touch with Nebraska even to this day? That's where you're originally from. What is the Havekost relationship with the state of Nebraska today? It's not home, but what is it?
I left Nebraska in 1990, college-wise. So I ended up going back there and living there for 2 years. Dad sold the farm late 90s. Extremely involved in Nebraska. We still are season ticket holders in Nebraska. He has a suite in Nebraska. I went to a game and took my family this year to Nebraska. Name still on the wall in the swim center. My dad has been fortunate enough to be very successful. He has given back to Nebraska financially. He gave back and built a baseball stadium in his hometown of Hooper for the American Legion team. He declined to have it named after him, but they have a state-of-the-art LED lights in the whole 9 yards at a town of 600 people that you could host a huge tournament now. So we're still attached to Nebraska, Dad more so than me. I give my money to USC. He gives his money to Nebraska. But he still goes to all the home games. To this day, he'll be 84 in June. He goes to the College World Series in Nebraska. He has season tickets to that and stays out there for 2 weeks and watches every baseball game. So we're still attached. Now, the football team had been worth a darn in about 20 years, but to this day, my second favorite school on the planet will be Nebraska.
Okay, why are the Gamecocks your favorite school?
Well, I ended up graduating from there. To me, it was a really good environment. The school was phenomenal. I got to see us join the SEC. I got to see the growth of the university go away from the old King Dixon years and
the Metro Conference.
I was Metro champion, I think, 12 times. Metro Swimmer of the Year. Metro, everyone knows what that is. It was us and Florida State and
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. Yeah, we swam at Virginia Tech. Blacksburg, that old campus, we swam there. But I got to see what was happening. A lot of my friends, 90% of my friends ended up at USC back then. It's kind of like now. People either go to Clemson or USC from around here. Every so often you get some people that venture out and go to Georgia or out of state. Or we had a few. Keith Player, I think he went off to Princeton. But it was few and far between. So the camaraderie and the friendship and the closeness to home. And I love South Carolina. People ask me why I live in Florence. I was like, I'm 2 hours from an international airport, and I'm an hour from the beach. I can go shopping in Charleston, and it's the best city in America. So there's nothing wrong with Florence, South Carolina, or the state. And Columbia, other than it being unbelievably hot in the summertime, is one cool city.
When did you start thinking about a career? You're swimming, you're in Columbia, you've left Nebraska. When did you start thinking about what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
Well, 1992, I made the Olympic trials in 88 and 92. Swam my 5th year in college, and I wasn't thinking about a career at all. I was making the Olympic team. So I was in Olympic trials, and I think you got to finish top 6, and I had a horrible meet. I think I finished like 12th, so I missed. But in Olympic terms, I missed it by about three tenths of a second.
But you were pretty dedicated to that for an extended period of time.
Well, from age 5 to 23. I mean, I was ranked.
It was a dream. You were chasing a dream.
World. I still have school record at 17-time All-American swimming. So swimming was going to go on. Maybe if you make the Olympic team, you can push off a year. Get a couple endorsements. A little
delay growing up.
Well, anyway, I didn't make the Olympic team, and I graduated college, and I'm standing there, and my dad and mom come to the graduation. They look at me and go, "Rick, what's up?" That's why I took the MCAT, I took the LSAT, and I took the GMAT. I know I was going to go to grad school. Thought I was going to make the Olympic team. Didn't. You going to train for 96 Olympics, 4 more years? No, I've looked at the bottom of a swimming pool for 20 years. You going to go to graduate school? I said, it didn't apply to any. I got my grades back. I think I could probably get into a few. And he goes, well, give me your Texaco card, and here's your insurance card. And you start giving back to the families and stop taking. And that's when I started worrying about a career. Literally on the spot. I'm standing out in front of the Carolina Calls, or the old Frank McGuire. And I was like, what am I going to do? So in any event, I ended up getting into the restaurant business, worked for Del Bar for a little bit. Ended up with Ruby Tuesdays and going through that, the restaurant business, and I was enamored by it. Ended up being the first managing partner in Ruby Tuesdays history. So I actually owned 50% of the one out at the mall. First person to ever do that in the whole company out of 500 locations, and they offered me 8 more, and I was going to have to move, didn't want to move. And then as I said no, I found out real fast that I wanted to do things my way and not their way. I wanted to run it as if it was a Florence restaurant, and they wanted to run it as a national brand, which is their restaurant. And we ended up seeing eye to eye, and we parted ways. And I got paid out. They owed me a contract. I think it was like $55,000 a year for 5 years, and then some stock and stuff. And that was in 94, 5, whatever. No, about 96, 7. In any event, so I didn't do a whole lot for about 6 months. And I had worked right out of college after that short, brief conversation with my mom and dad. You got to get a job. So I did. I was living with Jay Saleeby, my old attorney here in town. We were roommates, and he was going to law school. So we had our apartment, and I went to work for Jerry Greenbaum. He owns Green's Liquors as a stock boy. I think my pay was maybe $380 an hour. Something like, what would that be back in 91? I think that would have been minimum $335, $380. Any event. But I sat there and I watched what was going on in this store, the Greens on Assembly Street. I remember asking, it was a football Saturday, and they had done, this is 1992. On the liquor side only, they did $80,000. On the beer and wine side, they did $130,000 in 10 hours on a football Saturday. And I'm looking at these bottles and looking at the crowds and the lines of people. And Jerry Greenbaum was very wealthy. He owns California Dreamin'. He owns New York Prime, Tower Packaging. He owned part of the Atlanta Braves at one time, you name it. He was, and I was like, golly, this looks like something I can do. Well, anyway, fast forward to leaving Ruby Tuesdays, I floated the idea. Dad wanted me to work somewhere else. He said he would help me.
How involved is Dad in your life when he's letting you figure it out?
Well, he told me he would help me do anything I wanted, but I had to go work for somebody else for 5 years. He wasn't going to just say, here, we're going to do this. So when the Ruby Tuesday thing came to an end, he was all on board. He said, bring us some ideas. We almost bought PAs. We almost bought Benton's Restaurant. Because I had been in the restaurant business. I said, Dad, all anybody sees in a restaurant is they see you going around and shaking hands and ask them how things are. You don't see the prep cook at 6 a.m. in the morning or the dishwasher quitting at 9 o'clock at night and you're washing dishes. So everybody sees the good side of a restaurant. They don't ever see how you got to hire 10 people a week. So I, the best I could, persuaded him that the restaurant business wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I floated the idea of a liquor store. And he looked at me and goes, that is the most unreputable business. What in the heck would bring you that idea to me? Why would you think I'd say yes to that? I said, Dad, it's not what you sell, it's how you sell it. I said, some of your best friends in this town sell alcohol. It was Chris Giannis at the time, Byron's dad, Fred DeBar. You're friends with all of them. I said, they do it right. They have clean trucks. They got good employees. They present their brands well. And he kind of took a step back. I said, Dad, let's just get in the car. So we drove for a week. Every day to a different city and went to the Oasis, went to Frugal McDougal's, which is 30,000 square feet. And he saw these stores with fountains and displays and mahogany registers, and they were scanning. They weren't dirt, no lights in the parking lot, bars on the window. And he goes, Rick, this is something. And my father, his IQ is off the chart. And then,
he's business minded.
Oh,
anyway.
he's an engineer, and my left-handed, and just almost beat me to death over the numbers. Made me dress up and act like I was going to go borrow money from Charlie Williams over at First Citizens, or no, it was First Union at the time, or whatever it was. But in any event, went through all the numbers, and he started doing the math on. And at the time, Ashby Gregg owned the largest liquor store here out in Quimby. And he was doing a really good job. His dad started. But it was out in Quimby. I said, let's do it right in the middle of town. We'll have the biggest parking lot, the biggest store, the biggest selection. We'll carry stuff nobody else does. And then we'll do catering. We'll deliver to everybody's weddings. Ashby wasn't doing that. We'll get in the bar business. We'll sell to every bar and restaurant within 50 miles of here. Ashby wasn't doing that. And he looked at me and goes, and I remember Dad said, we're not going to sell cigarettes. I said, Dad, you got to get over what we sell. It's just a widget to you and I. It's about making money. So he warmed out. We opened up without certain products because he was against it morally. Then he realized, he doesn't drink scotch, but that doesn't mean we're not going to sell it. So we started carrying all that. So we redefined the liquor business in about 2000. We started catering. Back then, you had newspapers that would do the wedding announcements. And my dad would handwrite a letter and mail when they do a wedding announcement to every family that was ever in the Florence Morning News. A letter from Dick Havekost owner. He was 50-50 owner. I had sweat equity. He gave me 50% of the stock, and it was legal. And Dad put up, he collateralized a loan, but we went through the motions with the business plan. And the
You're
whole
partners.
I mean, we were partners, 50-50. And over time, through the sweat equity, I ended up with 50. I think we had 5,000 shares. I had 2,500 shares at the time. This is when we had one store. And so I had ownership, and I had my dad. He originally said he was going to stay for a couple of years. Well, he was retired from Nucor. He got bored. He ended up staying for 20 years and stayed forever. He exited the company pre-COVID, right around COVID, and gifted me through, we had to do all kinds of analysis with accounting and stuff to go through the government. There's a 2-year vesting process, and he gifted me over. His share's part of an estate, and gifted the same dollar amount to my sister to make it fair. He does everything equally. I mean, he's very methodical about it. So since 2024, I've owned 100% of the company.
Okay, let's green liquor. I get that. Havekost, Micky Finn.
Well, that's okay. Lawrence McIntosh was our attorney, and the name of the company, the corporation, is RDBP, Rick Dick Beverage Packaging. Well, because you got to get incorporated with the Secretary of State, and you got to form up your S corporation, and you got to do all that. Well, You're not putting RDBP on a building. So Dad goes, we got to start writing down names. Lawrence wants doing a DBA, doing business as. So we start writing names. I got names down there. Dad was really pushing towards, there's Trader Joe's. He wanted to call Trader Rick's. I said, I don't want my name on this dang. What if it fails? I got Rick all over this dang building. And I wasn't telling him that because I knew we'd be okay. But we started 5 Points Liquors. Well, that's not big enough. What if we start opening up liquor stores everywhere? There's not a 5 Points at the beach. Well, anyway, we had Cheers, 21st Amendment, where they repealed the alcohol. We were going to call it all these different things. Well, my dad put on his piece of paper Micky Finn's. And I was like, Frugal McDougal's at the time, sounds Irish, biggest store in the state. I said, Dad, that sounds, and he tried to talk me out because, Rick, I was just kidding around. So what does that mean? Well, it was a character in some 1930 movies. I think Humphrey Bogart played him, and he was the bartender, and his name was Micky Finn. And he would slip you a Mickey to get rid of unruly patrons. And that's where you hear it in the movies, he slipped you a Mickey. That's where it came from. Well, then it was commonly known in the Boston's Bartender Guide as Make It a Mickey. That was commonly known as a double. Well, slipping you a Mickey got some bad rap in the 70s with all the drugs and all the free world and all that other stuff, where people would get roofied or Mickey'd. So Boston Bartender Guides has pulled the word Mickey out of it as, make it a Mickey. But that's not what it's about. It was just it was the name of a character in a 1930s movie. Sounds like a franchise. I get calls all the time, Rick. Who do I contact about the franchise, or can I franchise your company? And I said, it's not a franchise. I made it up. Well, I made the company up. Dad essentially.
How long was the debate on the name?
I would say.
Was it an hour, a day, a week, 2 weeks?
It was. I'm going to say this. I'm very decisive. And a lot of people say that, guy, he's just like a bull in a china closet. When I make a decision, I'm willing to live with it. And I'm going to say he tried to talk me out of it for about 10 minutes. I said, Dad, that's the name. We're not going. We're moving on.
So his idea, he tries to talk you out of it. Is that the mind of an engineer?
It was 30 names, and he's very creative, and he had all these other names, and he was lobbying for some other names. And I knew that first of all, it rolls off your tongue. So that's, you don't want to fight a name, Frugal McDougal's is already known. It sounds Irish. Irish drink a lot. Boston tea, all that stuff. And it just simplified. Now, we took the E out because the mouse has an E in it, Mickey Mouse. And we catch, heck, I was about to cuss on your show here.
It's a podcast.
But I know. But any event, about people will send my email address, rickh@mickeyfins.com. They always put an E in it. So I have to send text.
I did for a while.
And I wouldn't get stuff. People like, Rick, I emailed you about this project, or I got a question. So where'd you send it to? With an E. So I'm in the process of trying to buy the domain name with an E. I think I'm going to have to pay about $5,000 for it. Hopefully Julia pulled the trigger on that today. But in any event, and I did that because Mickey Mouse, Mickey. Remember that Mickey Mouse back in the day?
Sure.
So we pulled the E out. So it's Micky Finn's without an E, and that's how it came to be fruition.
You build this, what I'll call a libation superstore. You're in the South. This ain't Lincoln, Nebraska. I mean, Lincoln, Nebraska is the heartland, but you're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. How contrasting was that?
Well,
how much respect did you feel you owed the culture of the South and the Bible, if any?
I'm going to tell you really the crutch of this. The Bible Belt, yeah, because you're going to deal with the Baptists, but
Yeah.
They were in there.
They want you to put it in a bag. I'll never name a name.
As far as I know, you've never been in my store, Ken.
No. Of course not.
Never have.
Of course not.
But
I have no idea what you're talking about, Rick.
Here's what I did. When we started building the first store, and it's 26 years old now, we've looked at moving it around, moving it from where it is because it's too small. And if I could find the right piece of property or renovate a piece of property, I'd build a real superstore 3 times that size. But when we built it, it had Mexican tile and it had fountains and it was well lit. And all these things you didn't see, cameras and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to say, well, I did that about the culture. Well, in the culture in the South, women are very important. You say yes, ma'am here, and you say yeah in Nebraska. When I went off to college, I had every girl and mother in my palm of my hand. Yes, ma'am. I'm like, well, who's this guy? He's from Nebraska, he's from South Carolina. Well, down here, that means something. And I learned real fast, about 70% of the money in the economy is controlled by women. I mean, I don't know what you think, but my wife,
that's about right.
She buys the groceries, she buys the clothes, she picks where we're going.
And if she spends it all, then
and that's fine. So the stores were defined around women. I knew if I could get 70% of the population, 70% of the money, people happy, I could I could stage off some of the people that want to judge you because it's a controlled substance, the Baptist, if you want to say, and they're not bad. They're really
of course not.
They're not. But, that's just kind of a running joke as we stand. And I think if you run your business properly, it's no different than, I think you had Dale Barth on here. Dale Barth has a bar, and he stays open back in the day at midnight. He didn't, as long as you run a clean, well-run establishment, you operate within the laws and the regulations, and you don't try to do any harm to anybody, you're going to be okay. Now, if you get outside of that, you do one bad thing, you sell to somebody underage or whatever it might be, and I'm knock on wood, it could happen to me while I'm sitting here right now. But I have some strict controls, and people know the consequences. And so that's how they do it. And I don't know if that answers the question between Nebraska and here. Down here, it's more of we talk a little slower. It's more personable, and if you run a good operation, people notice it. It's very sterile in Nebraska. You're just a company, and you go in and out, and I mean that's the difference. So I just figured I had to win the women over here in town, and I figured I'd get.
Well, your commitment, and I'm not blowing your horn. I mean, I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, your commitment to professionalism in whatever business you try. I mean, and I see that the dedication you've made to being very professional in whatever service you're trying to provide. Florence is only so big. There's only so many people in Florence that want to buy something to drink, whether it's wine, liquor. I mean, you got cigars. I'll let you get into that in just a second. But you've done a good job from our conversations of growing the business outside of Florence. Yep. When did that become kind of something you really concentrated on?
I knew we decided to get our federal license. What does that mean? Okay, we have a retail license. Federal license means I could sell to bars and restaurants for wholesale. So if you went to Outback Steakhouse, somebody has to supply their alcohol. And I was like, why can't that be me? And I did. I applied for my federal license. The FBI showed up at my house and my parents' house where I know we got the money and did background checks. We had to get references, and they approved us. So I started selling to bars and restaurants. And, that was going well, but I could only sell to the people. And back then the law was you had to come pick it up. In other words, you put waitress Susie in a car and say, go over to Micky Finn's and pick up our $3,000 liquor.
The law would let you do that, but not put your booze in.
I could not deliver. And so we had all the people had to come get it. Now, in a way, you'd say that's a great business. Who would not love for you don't have to deliver or have trucks or anything? Well, okay, that's great and all. Florence at the time, its city limits, 35,000, 40,000 people, county 100,000. Well, damn, I look year over year, I'm growing at 1-2%. I can't grow. So I got to get involved in changing this delivery laws. And so I started the ABC board with some other people from around the state. And that was when the mini bottle law was there. And we went to Freeport, and Hugh Leatherman came at the last minute and says, I think, well, this is going to go through. Is there any one thing, not two things, Rick, any one thing you want attached in the 23rd hour? I said, Hugh, and he was good friends with my father at the time. I need delivery. And he goes, why? He goes, because I can't deliver, and I think we should have insurance on our drivers. Our vans should be listed with the state, and I could grow this company. And it passed. Within 1 year, Micky Finn's doubled in size. Within 2 years, it quadrupled in size. Within 4 years, it went fourfold over again. I started flying around the country and going and visited people like Cheesecake Factory in California, Top Golf in Texas. I said, we sell to 42 Applebee's statewide. And I deal with the president of Applebee's, as nobody ever showed up. They were all buying from different people, different bottle of Crown Royal. And
what was your sales pitch to those folks?
Static pricing, one phone call, I'll make it right. You won't have rogue managers that will be able to, if the spec is to Kuiper Peachtree in that drink, and you got managers trying to make their liquor costs and pouring bowls, and it's a crappy drink in that city, we will freeze that account. They can only get company spec. You want to do a product placement, you're going to do a Long Island iced tea in all 43, you call our location. Well, you don't call anymore, it's all electronic, but the next day, 10 cases of that liquor will be delivered to all 42 locations. And if you don't use it, we pick it up. Static pricing, lowest price state, guaranteed. I don't care if I have to lose money. Somebody comes in and lowballs them, that's fine. Lowball it. You can't do it. So I'm selling right. I negotiate our buying power. I sit down with the reps once a month, every month. I just closed one out on the way here, and I bought for the next quarter from that individual. Woodford was one of the bourbons I bought. I don't know, a couple hundred cases of Woodford Leaders for bars and restaurants. And then I just sold them on, hey, what do you mean? So you're going to have the same price in all of our restaurants in Clemson. You sell in Clemson? Yep. Aiken, Charleston.
You take the complication out of it.
100%. It's one order. All restaurants know the company spec. They know what the cost is. I notify everybody 30 days in advance if there's a price increase from a supplier so they can adjust their menus. It's what I wanted when I ran my restaurant and then nobody could give me. I was like, what, how nice would it be as opposed to I go to the liquor store and I was paying $10 for this bottle and I go the next day and it's $14. Well, why didn't you tell me to buy 2 yesterday? Well, I'm sorry, here's your new price. No, you want to buy 100 today and it goes up in 30 days? That's fine. And so it brought I guess, a very corporate mentality to what used to be the Wild Wild West and just buying from your local guy.
So how critical was the folks in Florence called it South Florence? It's really the Pamplico side of town. When did you decide to build the store on the Pamplico side of town?
Well, I'll just spill the beans here, and he'll probably listen to this, but Jimmy Brown had just sold his company, and he decided to get Phil Phillips and some of the other family. They wanted to get in the liquor business, and the rumor had got it back to me that he was talking about building a store on the other side of town. And he ended up, he did get in the liquor business, but he did it down in Pawleys Island. And Jimmy and I are really good friends now. But Jimmy was going to do this. He didn't know anything about liquor business, but he's going to put his brother in there and his father-in-law, blah, blah, blah. And my dad looked at me and said, what are we going to do? He said, if we're going in this business, we're going to go all in. So we called Dr. Eddie Floyd, and he owned that piece of property. It was farmland out there. I think the Lowe's was there. I don't even think the Food Line was there yet. There was nothing over there. The hospital, basically. There's no Ruby Tuesdays. And called Dr. Floyd and said, "Can we buy this piece right here?" We walked around there with his name was Cecil at the time. It handled, I don't know if you remember, Big Cecil is part of the members. Rollins.
Was it Roland McLaughlin?
Roland McLaughlin.
Did a lot of bird dogging for that.
And I sat there, he didn't have shoes on, an old dirty pickup truck. I'm riding, pardon my French, bitch. My dad's against the door, and I'm in his pickup truck. We're riding around this field. Anyway, he said, we're going to buy this piece of property. And I don't know if they were asking $12 a foot, and we offered them 11 with a 7-day close. And we wanted our sign coming soon, and we put it out there through the, the gossip channels. The Havekosts are going all in to put another store, maybe a third one in Florence. They're going to use all their licenses. They've already bought the property, and they're going to copy their blueprints. And Dennis Ward, our architect, was ready to roll. And Charlie Grace was going to have it up and running in 6 months. We planted all that stuff. And I'll be damned, it worked. And at that point, we were committed, and we built the store in 2004. And it turns out Jimmy didn't stay in the liquor business, but at the time, I was really young. I was 34 years old. I had to make sure that I didn't get my cheese stolen. Mm-hmm. I had already invested my life into this thing. And unfortunately, Dad said, let's do it. So that's how the second store, it was competitive intrusion. I'm a capitalist. I think the greatest thing that could ever happen to you is if somebody came and opened up another podcast and went against you. Because you know what you'd do? You'd be even better at it than you are now. Sure, you'd have to be. Well, that's what happened. A lot of people go, oh, it's doom and gloom, sky's falling. I'm getting out. Anybody want to buy my business? They're scared. You got to just say, okay, be better, out-operate them. And that's the way we just approach it. You got to accept competition as part of the equation. Every day. It is. Competitive intrusion is everything you ever want. It's no different than I got a really pretty wife. There's no different than every guy when we walk into a restaurant or a bar, they're all looking at us. That's called competitive intrusion. I got to make sure she's dressed nice and she's on my arm, not his. You and I understand this. You wake up, if you're self-employed, you wake up every day unemployed. 100%. You wake up every single day unemployed, and it's up to you to make it work some way. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not saying I'm successful or not, because it is a challenge, and things can change at a drop of a hat. The laws can change. Hell, the drinking age can change to 35. I don't know. I think it's going to go the other way, and we're now going to sell marijuana. So it might be even more lucrative. But you don't know. I don't know. And I just opened a new store at Buc-ee's, and there's a lot of traffic out there. And I go out there from 9 to 4, and I'm like, I'm going to retire. I got a way out of here in 2 years. I'm going to print some money out here. Buc-ee's is a big deal. But what I learned real fast, you know what changed my dynamic out there? I'm going to be a Walmart greeter at 5 o'clock when I look at the numbers. There's nobody that lives out there.
Well, I
have no traffic out there.
Let's go down this road. Okay, you got it. You got your main store at 5 Points. You've got another store on the Pamplico side. That's right, the Pamplico side of town. You and I talked, 6 months ago, and you laid out a big blueprint and said, here's what I'm thinking about doing. And obviously, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people out there, but do we know who they are? Mm-hmm. You knew that. There's no question. Buc-ee's does over $1 million a day. That's absurd. But it's a truck stop. It's not a truck stop. It's a convenience store / tourist attraction / SEC tailgate / NASCAR race. I mean, it's the craziest
I call it
phenomenon.
Disneyland met Walmart.
But
and
I mean,
it had a baby.
You looked at traffic. You looked at people. You looked at consumers. I don't want to say how's that going. That's your business. But it's you're new in a venture of that sort.
I'll tell you.
How different is it than the other two?
It's 100% different. I was in the process of negotiating to buy a gentleman out and put 2 stores in Charleston and a store at the beach. And it would have given up my 3rd license here. And I went out to Buc-ee's. And I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never been to one. And I sat there by myself and I got on the phone with my dad. He has nothing to do with my company. I said, Dad, you got a minute? Can I come get you? So I load my dad up, drive all the way back in town, drive all the way out there. And he goes, what are we doing? You know, he's asking the engineer. And this whatever you want to call it, phenomenon's going on here. And he goes, you'd be a fool if you don't drop everything, your Charleston, any other plans. You need to focus on here. You use your last license here. You cover your bases, and you go back to do your other things. But he said, we need to get into the numbers. Dad's a numbers guy. And we need to call who owns the land across the street. So I called David Tedder, led me to Baron Urban, led me to Dr. Floyd again. Here I am back at Dr. Floyd because the Bruce Lee Foundation developed all that. Well, fortunately, Baron handles a lot of the real estate, and we look into the numbers. I want the traffic counts, north, south, 327. Who's coming and going, which way they're going. We went a step further. Barron had the information on cell phone service, how many people spent 4 minutes or longer in the Buc-ee's parking lot. And they would tell you. Geo-tracking. It's some extremely expensive software that I don't know if the Bruce Lee Foundation funds it or if Beaver allows them to use it or Barron pays for it for all their developments, but he shares that with me almost monthly now. And I went to Barron's office, and I was afraid they weren't going to let me go out there. I thought, you want a liquor store out there? And I'm thinking they're going to build Hilton hotels and Carrabba's. And they're like, what? And they're like, no. And Eddie Floyd is a fan of Micky Finn's and myself and my dad. And he's like, we'd love to have you. In fact, they recruited us. We went to Barron's office, and he had a PowerPoint on his 80-inch TV with the traffic count, how long, how much money, the tax that they were raising, the hot food tax that the county's getting. How long the stoplight was, the easements. We'll give you any size piece of property you want. We'll move the lot lines. You build whatever you want, Rick. You go first. They recruited me, which made me feel good about my company and the reputation of it. Because a lot of people they want to hem haul around. I am in a controlled substance business, and they rolled out the red carpet. Now, what they wanted for the land out there was they paid with the red carpet with the money they were going to charge me. But Dr. Floyd, I signed an NDA. Dr. Floyd and Barron and the Bruce Lee Foundation, they worked with us, and the math has to work. If the math doesn't, I don't care how much money you could bring in $100 million. If your bills are $101 million, you don't do the business. You don't do the deal. So the math worked out, and we put the sign out there the next day, and boy, it blew up. People all over the East Coast. Who's the guy building this store out in front of Buc-ee's? So that's how all that went down. And I just laid it out. I did all the due diligence. Dad requires it, and I think I require that out of my son now.
Okay, well, let me play journalist for a second. I gotta believe that Sundays are one of the busiest days of the week for Buc-ee's. The beach traffic. I mean, coming and going home, going to the beach, whatever. I mean, that's a prominent exit for people who are trying to get to the beach. It got so busy at the Grand Strand, it's not Saturday to Saturday with everybody. It's Saturday to Saturday with half and Sunday to Sunday with the other half. Do you have any idea how much revenue you're not bringing in the door and how much economic development is not being generated by South Carolina being, I don't want to say old-fashioned, but a little bit different than a lot of other states?
I'm going to say this. Number one, the Alcohol Association that I am on the board of is anti-Sunday sales. And I went along with that idea for a long time.
Why, Rick? Why would that association be anti-Sunday sales?
A lot of it has to do with the stores that are owned are mom and pops, single families, and I call it liquor store prison. They don't have any employees, and they get Sundays off, and they would have to work another day because they would be forced to. And people say, well, you don't have to open on Sunday. Well, the big guy down the street is going to open on Sunday. I would open on Sunday. And so there's a lot of sentiment out there and to hold together the coalition of people. Now, as far as that being said, and I've told the board members that I sit on, I'm on the board, so guys, this one issue, I now have this store out on the interstate, and Sunday's the busiest day, and I'm watching. They did $1.7 million one day out there. And the number of cars, it was 25,000 cars in a 10-hour period. You can do the math. If I got 1% of them, and all that tax revenue is from out of state. The sales tax, the property tax, everything out there is from people that don't live here. So it makes sense on my end. So I want Sunday sales. It got defeated this year, mainly to do for the association that I'm a part of. We don't even have beer and wine sales in the county yet. I think that's going to be on a referendum this fall.
How do you? I want to get your take on this. You're in the business. You've even said it's controlled substance. We talked about the Baptist church. I mean, we wink and nod when we talk about. I mean, you know how you stop a Baptist drinking all your beer, invite another one. I mean, that's kind of the old joke. And I'm Baptist and I drink. I partake. Don't apologize. It's my right to do what I choose to do. I mean, I respect the Sabbath, but everybody doesn't see the world as I do, and I certainly don't. I don't think have the authority or right to tell people to live as I think they should live. But how do you speak to the Southernism that looks at Sunday as a day that we don't have any business going to a convenience store or a libations superstore and buy booze? I
have been in this debate and argument with a lot of different. Tim Norwood owns Victor's, sponsor.
Yeah.
Tim called me in 2000. I think it was 2008. And it was called the Yes Campaign he had put together. And he recruited Dale Barth, myself, Hal Neal that owned Pershing Willie's. I think the general manager.
People that skin in the game.
Out at Outback here in Florence. And his main goal, I think Shane that owned Appalachians, maybe it was Larry at the time, but any event, Rick, will you give some money? Will you sign a petition? Will you go out and promote this? We want Sunday sales. And it was a very sticky issue. And what we were looking for was a referendum. You let the people vote. You got Mothers Against Drunk Driving. You got the Religious Coalition. You got whatever it is, and they can say their piece, and they can lobby and do all they want. Tim was very careful about it, and he got some key people in the community, and we got it on a referendum. And I think it passed 65-35, or maybe it might have been 60-40, but it passed, which is a landslide.
That's
in an election.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, when you get over 5 points, you've won the game. I mean, you've won decisively. And that's how we ended up with Sunday sales. So I've already been down that road of trying to get Sunday sales. Okay, so then it happens again. We had a referendum 3 years ago to allow Harris Teeter, Food Lion, Micky Finn's to sell beer and wine on Sundays. And what forced that? It wasn't Darlington County and Hartsville all decided to pass it. And New Year's Eve fell on a Sunday evening, and the Walmart in Darlington sold like 10 pallets of Bud Light. And all that tax revenue, all people did is just drive another mile and a half. And all the revenue was lost out of Florence County. And I don't know who got it put on the referendum. It got put on the city referendum. So it passed 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, for beer and wine inside the city limits. 10 years earlier, it passed as little beer and wine in restaurants. So this has been a 15-year process to go from zero to in restaurants to beer and wine on Sunday, so you can go to Harris Teeter, you can go to Micky Finn's, you can go to the gas station and get
or you can not go if it's Sunday.
Yeah, correct. Well, that's Super Bowl Sunday. You can walk in there and say, hey, you know what? I forgot. My cousin's coming in town. I'm going to get a 6-pack of beer. Whatever. You don't have to buy anything if you don't want to. So we have made progress for Florence County. But Florence County, I think, there's only 3 or 4 counties left. The county does not have beer and wine sales. So now Florence County is this progressively fast-growing county with the battery plant and Buc-ee's. All out there on the fringes. Buc-ee's, go to Buc-ee's on a Sunday, about 4 o'clock, and watch them put 100 buggies full of beer and wine back when they get to the register, and they're from Ohio, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and they say, sorry, you can't buy. And the money and the revenue, and all they're doing is they're going to drive right to the North Carolina line, or they're going to go to the Georgia line, or wherever they're going. You didn't stop anybody. You just made them mad. So what is going on?
And you missed the tax revenue.
And you missed tax revenue. And I'm not a big fan of government. I don't think they need more revenue, but this is low-hanging fruit. I'm not looking to raise my property taxes or my income taxes, but what you can do is like the penny tax. 90% of that money is being paid by travelers. Sure. It's not being paid by the local economy. We get the property tax relief. Same thing can be done out there on the beer and wine. You got the pilot out there. You got Buc-ee's. You got the race on Sunday. You can't buy alcohol on Sunday in the county over there where Buc-ee's was on the race day. The race was this past Sunday. You could not buy alcohol in Florence County. That is just, you are talking about something that's okay every other day and every other hour of the week. And why? And William Schofield, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I've been working with William, and he is putting it on the ballot for Sunday beer and wine sales. And I think we get the first reading June 20th. It's got to go through 3 readings. The procedures you got to go through. But I think it'll make it to the referendum. And if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But I think it will.
Why do you think I'll call it the beer and wine, let's call it the libation referendums, have passed by as wide a margin as they have?
Well, it's been up. There's been a lot of people, a lot of times a few voices are heard and the masses aren't. And it's the adage, the squeaky wheel gets oil. So if you got a progressive religious coalition, or they're out there, they're front and center, and it's going to be very hard for me.
And they deserve to be out there.
Of course. But I'm not, when they come and put a microphone in front of me tomorrow at Micky Finn's, what do you think about Sunday sales? I might not answer that question because it's not it's a position of saying he wants more alcohol available on the Sabbath. Well, you remember, Ken, you've been here forever. So the blue laws, we couldn't go to Lowe's until 1 o'clock on Sunday. Mm-hmm. You couldn't go buy, if your pipe broke, you couldn't go buy a piece of PVC pipe. If it broke at 9 a.m. Sunday morning on the way to church, the hot water heater broke. You turned off at the street. You didn't miss church. You turned the water off to your house. You waited till 1 o'clock, walked into Lowe's to buy a washer or whatever, and then could go fix it. And somehow sanity came to fruition, and we got rid of the blue laws. And but I do respect the South. I like things that move slow. I love Pawleys Island and Litchfield. You know why? They don't have big box stores. I like the pace of the South. So this 15-year journey that I'm on the Sunday sales, I've done okay without it. I do better with it, and I think it will pass. It's inevitable. So I'm not out there, putting billboards up, pass referendum, blah, blah, blah. But if you want my opinion, I don't think everybody will open on Sunday. I think it'd be a boondoggle for the revenue in the county, which we can, help build.
I've always felt, Rick, and you and I've had some political conversations, I'd be a libertarian-leaning Jeffersonian. For me to suggest that I don't like government until I want government to do things that kind of advance I guess that's human nature, but I think it's inconsistent and a bit hypocritical, to be honest with you.
Government is a necessity. There's no doubt about it. You have to pool. It's no different than having insurance on your car. You couldn't afford insurance if you didn't pool the money with everybody else buying insurance. Well, government's the same way for paving roads and the whole 9 yards. It's the frivolous spending on the government that drives people crazy, or at least drives me crazy. If it's being used for the betterment and help pave the roadways, or build the new park in town, or the civic center, or the Florence Center, or the soccer complexes, and I'm trying to get an auditorium built for the school district with Dr. O'Malley and Fred Carter, that is where I'm a firm believer in government, because it takes that kind of money and power to build big things. So on that side of it, I'm good with the government, but it's when they get petty and they find you and they just want more and more and more all the time.
Last question, and I mean this sincerely. I don't want to get your take on this. You've been a successful businessman. Your father was a very successful businessman. You operate your business in a community. What do you don't owe the community anything except what you choose to give back. What motivates you? How do you decide how involved or not? I mean, you help us with the podcast. You don't have to do that, but why do you choose to be as outspoken in support of the community as recently you've become? Because I think recently you become more of an advocate than you ever have.
I will say this. I've been fortunate. My father was successful. I didn't know that he was successful until I was older. And he taught me well. He sent me to the good school, and I got my degree, and I started doing things. But my mother and my father always said, if you're going to be you need to be a good steward of the community. And they never put a number on it, but I always felt like it was, and not tithing, but it was 10%. Well, that could be 10% of what? Is that 10% of the gross? Is that 10% of the net? Is that 10% of the expenses? Is that 10%? Whatever it could be. But it was year one, and people knock on your door all the time and want money for this, that, and the other. So we did have to come up with some criteria. And we started partnering with people that were really in it for the community, the Heart Ball and the Bonafit. Debbie Heiler over at the School Foundation. I mean, there's numerous ones that we're involved with, but I just think it's a part of to be a good member of society in a small town. In a town like this, you can move the needle, and you can name the 15 or 20 people in this town that are involved in everything. You see them all the time. It's Kay Floyd. I mean, it's the same people that are making this happen. Now, if there was 50 more that would make it happen, I don't know if I'd be as involved. but you can make a huge influence on this town by giving a little back. It doesn't have to be money. It can be your time. You can volunteer. You know, I've been on every board, their Easter Seals boards, whatever you want to do. But I think a town the size of Florence, you need to be involved. I mean, you'd get lost in Atlanta. No offense, Ken Ard and Rick Havekost in Atlanta are nobodies. In this town, you can actually get to William Schofield and Dr. Eddie Floyd and Fred Carter, and you can institute change for the good. So that's why I do it.
Rick, don't you feel, I mean, we're having a conversation. This is it's podcast material. I mean, we are at a place. You talked about Hugh Leatherman. You talked about Dr. Eddie Carter. That is a huge chapter in Florence's history. People like you and I will write the next. I mean, not you nor I, but people like us will decide what the next 50 years of Florence looks like and what sort of future we were able to be a part of providing for your kids and mine.
I'll say that those are big shoes. I don't know if anybody will ever have the tenure that Hugh Leatherman did.
But somebody will have to try.
I can't fill his shoes, but I can wear some flip-flops and do my best. Yeah, that's all I can say. And it does. And there is somebody out there. There's somebody that will move here. There'll be people that could make a small fortune here. I mean, there's a lot of people that have, the Synergy Group. They're doing a lot for downtown. You know the players in that, and they've decided to reinvest here. So that the book is not finished. We're in chapter 2 of a 20-chapter book. I'll see chapter 3 and 4. I would love to come back and see chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 with all that's going on here, because I think it's be great. I would love my daughter to live here and want to raise her kid and go to a good school here and see how it evolved. And you're not going to make a difference in Charlotte. I don't care, unless you're Bill Gates. You're just not going to make a difference. And here, you can kind of carve out and have some direction with the community and then join in with all the success it's going to have.
Last question: what does Rick Havekost like to drink when he's not he's not growing a business or trying to talk community leaders into X, Y, or Z?
I go on all these trips and we fly around the world and pick out these barrels of tequila in Jalisco, Mexico, and
because you got a lot of private label things in there.
We do all that. We'll have over 125 different barrels that we carry in our stores. And I used to do all that myself. Now the guys, it's kind of a reward strip for those guys. I don't go on all of them anymore. And a lot of those people come to us now. They're like, Rick, we want your name on this bottle. Will you buy the barrel out? And we clear, like Halls, we do all the Halls barrels and their names, and we clear their bourbon for them, et cetera, et cetera. But mine's is just crazy. It's very simple. And I got access to all these drinks, and I get today. I got 20 samples in my office I didn't even try of all different liquors, flavors. I don't care. Coconut vodka, whatever. I drink Grey Goose and water flat with ice. In fact, if you go into the 5 Point store, there's a Grey Goose sign on the wall. I don't know if you ever noticed it. And it says Rick's Drink of Choice. And it's Grey Goose with the birds all right. And when I have too much, they all say I got the bird flu. I'm dead serious. I go, Rick's got the bird flu today.
Good deal.
He drank too many Grey Goose.
Well, I want to say this. I mean, Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Micky Finn's, Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, McCall Farms, Pepsi, Florence PLC Commercial Real Estate, McLeod. I mean, every one of these businesses give tremendously back to this community. I'm trying to build some momentum and telling stories like Rick's that you just heard. If you're interested, if you like it, if you appreciate it, I hate to say this, but subscribers help. Some of the views obviously help. We're in the process of growing the business. As Rick talks about, growing a business is a challenge, but none of it would have been possible without our guest. And I want to thank Rick Havekost for spending nearly an hour with us, telling the story of his family, his arrival to Florence, and Micky Finn's, which is, and I want to say this, I grew up in a town where you were a little nervous to go to the liquor store late in the afternoon. I mean, your place reeks of professionalism. And I mean that sincerely. People have bought in to the vision that you've created, and you're to be commended for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.